America is back. That is the bold statement from President Trump as he addressed a joint session of the United States Congress for the first time since he returned to the White House. In a speech which was the longest a president has ever given to Congress, Donald Trump said America is on the brink of an unprecedented comeback as he lauded the bold actions his administration has made during the first 6 weeks in office. Praise was heaped on Elon Musk as the president thanked him for saving hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud through his Department of Government Efficiency. On trade, he confirmed from next month reciprocal trade tariffs will come into force against several nations. And the president also announced a crackdown on criminal gangs and immigrants, promising what he called the largest deportation in American history. And just days after their now infamous bust-up in the Oval Office, President Trump said he had received a letter from President Zelensky saying the Ukrainian leader is ready for talks with Russia to try and bring an end to the 3-year conflict, and signalled Moscow was ready to make peace. Right off the bat, President Trump made this bold statement to both houses of Congress.
Members of the United States Congress, thank you very much. And to my fellow citizens, America is back.
President Trump also said his administration has saved millions of dollars in waste, which he said was down to the work of DOGE and the boss, Elon Musk.
And to that end, I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Perhaps you've heard of it. Perhaps. Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight. Thank you, Elon. He's working very hard. He didn't need this. He didn't need this. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
And on trade, the president defended his decision to impose tariffs on Canada, Mexico and China, as well as making this announcement.
April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in. And whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them. If they do non-monetary tariffs to keep us out of their market, then we will do non-monetary barriers to keep them out of our market.
On the war in Ukraine, President Trump said he'd received a letter from President Zelensky just days after their explosive row in the Oval Office.
Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Well, our correspondent Helena Humphrey was watching the speech from Capitol Hill.
That longest of the joint addresses to Congress there in history. Donald Trump essentially taking to the stage, taking a victory lap, I think it's fair to say. This isn't, strictly speaking, a State of the Union speech, but nevertheless, Donald Trump certainly used it as an opportunity to tout what he saw as a long list of achievements in those at times frenetic 6 weeks back in the White House. He came on to that podium saying, America is back. He then started by touching on some of those well-worn themes that we had heard on the campaign trail when it comes to culture war issues, for example, saying that he had ended diversity, equity and inclusion programs, not just, he said, in the government, but with it also now spreading to the private sector. He then referenced the work of the Department of Governmental Efficiency, that initiative, of course, headed by the unelected billionaire Elon Musk, who was there in the audience, who stood up and was applauded by Republican lawmakers there in the chamber, who said for any of those federal workers who had been mandated to return to the office and did not do so, they could stand to lose their jobs. Worth pointing out that Democrats had also invited in the audience some of those tens of thousands of federal employees who we know have already been laid off through that initiative. And then, of course, one of the really important points to watch for, I think, for many Americans, of course, had been the economy. According to recent CBS polling, that remains the #1 issue for Americans, regardless of their political stripe. Donald Trump said that after years of a cost of living crisis in this country, he would make America great again. But of course, it's worth keeping in mind the context to all of this. On Tuesday, Donald Trump did go ahead with those promised tariffs on Mexico and Canada, and we did see volatility on the financial markets. He paid a little lip service saying that we saw a little disruption, but saying essentially that he believed it would be worth it, and then promising on the 2nd of April to bring in further reciprocal tariffs, saying whatever they tax us, we will tax them back. Immigration, of course, another key theme, saying that we are getting people out and we are getting them out fast, is what he said. And of course, foreign policy. I think the eyes of the world were on that, not just with regards to Gaza, but crucially right now, Ukraine, and referencing that letter from President Zelensky saying that they were ready for a peace deal as soon as possible. Worth pointing out, President Zelensky had said earlier in the deal that they were looking at a limited truce. And wrapping all of this up, coming back to this theme that we'd seen on the campaign trail, Donald Trump saying that he believed that he was saved in Butler, Pennsylvania in July during that assassination attempt as some kind of act of divine intervention, that essentially that is his mandate to make America great again.
Helena Humphrey there, who was watching that speech on Capitol Hill, as was Julia Manchester, a political reporter at the American newspaper The Hill, and she gave me her assessment of his address.
Well, look, it seemed a lot like a campaign speech in many ways. The president repeating a lot of his, lines that he used during the campaign to attack now former President Biden, for example, scolded Democrats repeatedly for not cheering for his accomplishments. So it was certainly partisan in that nature. And also, Democrats also showed, a lot of signs of partisanship as well. Of course, you got Congressman Al Green standing up and yelling at President Trump about, potentially cutting Medicaid, shaking his cane. For the first time, I believe, actually, in American history, you saw a lawmaker escorted from the House chamber for interrupting a joint session or State of the Union address. So that was quite something to watch. You also had a number of Democratic lawmakers holding up signs, essentially saying to resist or bashing Elon Musk. So this was incredibly partisan, incredibly political. And I think it's probably more so than past State of the Unions we have seen in recent history. Now, the president touched on a number of various issues like foreign policy, but Democrats, that I've talked to seem to be complaining that he didn't talk about the economy. And that seems to be a growing issue for the president now that we are continuing to see inflation in this country, and these tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China have been enacted this week.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that because, of course, this speech was very late, and that's because it's beamed across America on primetime television. And so he's very much got that audience in mind, I assume, the domestic audience. And for them, was the most important issue the money in their pockets?
Absolutely. Look, the president will tout the work he's done on immigration and, in his words, securing the southern border. Yes, that absolutely was a top campaign issue. But I would say that even the economy trumps that as a top issue for voters. And there are some troubling signs for President Trump when it comes to the economy. There was a recent NPR Marist poll that was released on Tuesday that found that 46% of Americans believe Donald Trump is handling the economy for the worst, while 42% said they believed he was handling it for the better. You've seen the stock market react negatively to these tariffs, and I think there are some concerns about how these tariffs are going to impact prices and just the economy in general in this country. And I'm sure a lot of Republicans in the chamber, even though they were cheering him at every possible chance they could, they were listening for his messaging on that issue, because in 2 years, these Republicans, all of them in the House of Representatives and some of them in the Senate, will be up for re-election, and Democrats have already begun to hammer them on the economy, something that Republicans mastered in terms of messaging during the last election.
Julia Manchester there from The Hill. Well, during his speech, President Trump did refer to a letter he said he'd received that day from Ukraine's president, saying that President Zelensky is ready to come to the negotiating table. Let's go live to Downing Street and join our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman. Henry, I'm sure some people in Downing Street behind you had the job of watching that speech, which went on for more than 100 minutes. And of course, Ukraine was a part of that. What do you think is going through the mind of the Prime Minister now this morning?
Well, I think as the Prime Minister wakes up, Sally, I don't know what time he wakes up, whether he is awake yet, but I think he'll be mightily relieved that what Donald Trump said overnight hasn't particularly altered what is a very delicate and very fraught diplomatic situation. Donald Trump hasn't been back in the White House that long, but we've already had so many mornings where behind me in Downing Street, the Prime Minister and others have woken up to discover a world which is changing. This morning doesn't seem to be one of those mornings. In fact, if anything, slightly encouraging signs that the president was talking up peace appeared to welcome Volodymyr Zelensky's intervention yesterday, in which he was clearly trying to do what the UK has been privately urging him to do, which is make up with the White House after that dizzyingly strange confrontation that Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump had in the Oval Office last week. Now, just because Donald Trump didn't spin this crisis again yesterday doesn't mean that it's all sorted. There are all sorts of massive questions still hanging over Ukraine, of course, and that conflict, but also really the Western alliance, the transatlantic so-called special relationship, which Keir Starmer is still going to have to confront. But this morning, President Trump hasn't inserted any new complications into that dilemma, and I think that will be treated in Downing Street as a sign for relief.